Hi, I'm Michael Ma, CEO of OnePassport. So COVID has driven change in a lot of areas, external to the obvious ones around vaccines and vaccine passports. Uh, and one of them is the rise of digital in general. In order to facilitate the whole working from home movement, digital solutions came of age during COVID, from telehealth to I'll Zoom you. So two of the key areas that came out of that, though, was the desire that I don't want paper, manual, analog, spreadsheet solution. I want a digital solution to record my data. So a SaaS system or an app on my phone, but it's got to be digital. And secondly, the information in there, I want to have verified, not just an attached copy. I actually want to know that it's a verified piece of information. Now, we're not set up as a society to verify all pieces of information yet. I'm sure that will come at some stage, but it isn't here yet. But one area which has now come of age for this is identity. Now, we all know the 100 points of ID check. You hand over a primary piece of ID like a driver's license, passport, birth certificate, and then a few ancillary pieces, including bank cards, debit cards, Medicare, etc., etc. And by having 2 or 3 pieces of information that all say the same details, they go, yep, that's you. But in reality, those pieces of information aren't verified. They're not tied back to the issuer. They're not tied to the person. It's just I happen to hold those 3 pieces of information that I'm handing over. So where do we go from here? Well, what has replaced 100 points of ID now is 2 forms of ID checking, and they're both separate, but they can work together depending on your need, because they all cost anywhere from 60, 80 cents or $1 each. So you might just need one for an Australian, but if they're coming from overseas and they've got other things, you might have to spend $2 or $3. It all depends on where they're coming from. So the first is biographic identity. The second is biometric identity. Biographic is actually taking that piece of ID and tying it back to the issuer of the ID. It's not tying the ID to me. So I hand over a driver's license and I enter in my name, my date of birth. It's a Victorian driver's license, and here's the number because I live in Victoria. It will actually bounce off a system called the DVS, the Document Verification System, which is only Australia and New Zealand. And it will come back and say, that is a legitimate driver's license in Victoria, registered to Michael Ma with that date of birth. So you can go, yep, he's got a real piece of ID. That's biographic identity. The other side is biometric identity. Does this ID actually belong to me? So this one is slightly different user case. This one, you hold up your phone and you scan your face and you move your face around, and it takes what's called a liveness test. It says that's a real face. It's not having a piece of a photo held up to it. It's actually saying the face is moving as I'm filming. I can see even the blood vessels or the breathing happening. It is a live face. Now I hold it up against my driver's license photo or my passport photo, and it scans that and says that's a photo, but it is the same characteristics as this person. So that person is actually the same person who's on this piece of ID. And then it does an OCR, an optical character recognition for authenticity of that ID, and says that looks like a real Victorian driver's license, and the guy holding it really is the guy whose picture's on it. So that's a biometric identity. You can then add in the first one, biographic identity, and actually bounce that off the DVS if you want. So that's how you do a real identity check these days. And they're very cheap these days. So if it is important to you to really know that the person you're hiring, the person you're contracting, the person who's coming into your house, the person you're letting on your campus as an education provider, the person who's coming through the Pacific Labour Scheme into Australia to work, is who they say they are, you need to use biographic and biometric identity checks. 100 points of ID doesn't cut it these days, not with the sophistication of technology to forge things. So that's where we've gone. It's no longer about 100 points of ID. If you want to get into this stuff, contact OnePassport. We can set up your organization. If you're an individual, we can help you to create a reusable digital identity on your phone, which you can then use in different scenarios. If you're a company and you want all of your staff to be able to go through this so that you actually know who you're doing, especially if it's part of your recruitment process, contact OnePassport. We can set you up. It has now come down in price so much that it's viable for everyone to do. So you've got that peace of mind that you actually know who's on your team. Take care and good luck.